Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Nick Lugo Show, where I study the tactics, practices, and principles of some of my favorite achievers. The achiever that I bring on today goes by the name of Penny Zenker, and she pretty much has done it all. She's a best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and podcast host. Her TEDx talk on energy and focus has received nearly 1 million views, and her message has spread across the globe. Today, she talks about really what she does as a focusologist. Yes, I love that term, focusologist, and how we could develop more focus in our lives and increase our productivity. This is something that, well, it's a myth. It's a myth that we need to work for such a long period of time and get so much done over that period. We could double our productivity in half the time. We could, stop worrying about time management and worry about getting stuff done. So she's pretty much the expert at that, and she shares her tips, tricks, strategies, and habits for you to be able to really do that yourself. So I really hope you check out the sponsors in the description below. Make sure to give my podcast a 5-star review on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts, and to subscribe to my YouTube. And, enjoy this episode with Penny Zenker because, she has so much to give and so much to teach. Enjoy. Yeah, that's why I love Indiana. It's not like the East Coast where, you're, hustle and bustle and everybody's worried about making money. Yeah, even for your focus stuff, it's like people, you're not about okay, you're going to work 90% of your time, 100 hours a week, just focusing. It's like, no, part of focusing is living a good life and doing all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was just thinking this morning about how, when we're focused on time, we're really, and this is our great fight, we're focused on scarcity.
Explain that.
So, think about it. There's not enough time, time is finite, right? There's only so much of it, and that's it, right? Is 24 hours a day. You can't change it. And we, one of the things that I've really looked into and explored during the pandemic is this idea of struggling for the tug of war, which is actually what I have on my best-selling book, right? The Productivity Zone. It's the tagline is "Stop the tug of war with time." And I thought, what is a tug of war? And it's the struggle for control. And I realized as I was digging deeper into that during the pandemic is why do we try to control things that we can't? Because that just stresses us out, and we exhaust ourselves trying to control things that we can't. And then we're exhausted to focus and face the things that we can control.
Yeah, exactly. You talk about this in your book. And of course, I read the book. First of all, I guess we just started because this is just, we're just going to go from here.
I thought we were just going into it. I know. It was good. We were sort of kind of bantering here.
Exactly. Let's do it. So, when you talk about, of course, I read your book, right? And for everyone who's interested, it will be in the link in the description below. Really incredible book. And the thing about it is she always talks about essentially how people always ask for more time, right? It's so much easier to just say, okay, if I had 20 hours in a week, then it would make my life easier. But really, yes, it's this tug of war. It's really okay, given this scarcity, given the fact that we have 24 hours in a day, what are we going to do to maximize it?
So we get caught up in scarcity. And believe me, I didn't say that I figured it out. I'm just doing the practices, what I call being a focusologist, to help me practice being mindful of the factors that help us to focus and overcome the scarcity, because it's kind of woven within us to do that. We're all control freaks. So how do we get on top of it? And it's not by focusing on time, right? It's focusing on the end result. What is it we want to create?
Well, that's one of the things that I found in my life. So, for example, I'm a college student, right? And I'm surrounded by college students. All of us are in this sort of race, right? It sort of feels like a race to who could get the best job, who could have the most success in their career. And obviously, when you talk about race, there's a huge focus on time. And the students here, you notice that some of them are really, really able to cram in all their work into 40, 50 hours a week, get their stuff done, get it done efficiently, and then call it a day, and then live their life, and then do the things that they want to do on the side. And then you have the people that are just so bad at time management. They haven't been able to develop those habits, and they get the same amount of work done in 90 hours a week and then call themselves successful and call themselves grinders. It's like,
it's a badge for it. Oh, totally. People want to badge themselves for it. I'm a grinder. Yeah. I'm a I'm a workaholic and all of that. It's a shame, the competitiveness of how busy we are. I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah, well, actually, what I do in my, I keep a calendar every day now, and definitely, like, I know you do too. And one of the things that I do at the end of my at my week is I tally up, okay, how many hours did I work this week? How many hours was I social? How many hours was I? And I list out all the things. And one of my categories is busy. How many hours was I busy? And that doesn't mean that's not a good thing. That's how many hours am I just, pretending to do things that are meaningful and thinking that I'm in that work mode when I'm really just avoiding the bigger things.
Interesting, right? That's cool. I've never heard that you're tracking you're busy. I've heard of tracking distractions. And I encourage people to do that, but that's an interesting thought, right? Because then you get really conscious of where you're just doing stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's one of the biggest things. You're a key tenet of focus, right? You really emphasize focus. And as a focusologist, I love that term, by the way. So so tell me, right? So what are sort of the main things that people struggle with in focus, right? Distractions, busyness, what are the things that you usually see the most?
Well, I'd say that first, I want to say that focus is much more than attention. So a lot of people, we underestimate what focus, the impact that focus has on our lives in terms of us being happy and successful and being able to live the life that is meaningful to us. Yeah. So I want to say sort of, let me tell you what my definition is, because that'll tell you what some of the components are. Mm-hmm. And then there's different ways to get there.
Okay, let's do it.
So my definition of being a focusologist is it's a practice, right? It's a person who practices being able to control and direct. There's that word again, right? Control. So focusing on what we can control. So being able to control and direct our thoughts, control and direct the energy of our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions to produce a positive, meaningful result.
Okay, so break that down. So it seems like there are 3 components. So break it all down.
Well, so if you think about it, focus is everything. The way that you show up, the way that you feel, all comes down to what you decide to focus on, right? And what fills your thoughts. So I say it's thoughts, feelings, and actions. There's a relationship there. It's like the chicken and the egg. Some people want to make a change in their life, so they're going to take a new action, right? People say, just get into action. And that's true. It will have an impact, but the action part isn't the epicenter of what drives us. And so it's very possible that we can burn out. It's not sustainable, right? So a great example is somebody makes a New Year's resolution, right? We've all made a New Year's resolution, and I don't know what percentage of those actually stick, right? There's I forget what the statistic is,
8%. But the answer is 8%.
Oh, I love that you know that. 8% stick. All right, I'm going to remember that now, right? Only 8%. Why is that? It's because the actions aren't the driver. And so therefore, we're trying to force something to change, and we're not going to the root cause. So that's why we need to go to the root cause, which is our thoughts, which relate to our self-talk, the stories we tell us, and even most importantly, the questions that we ask ourselves, because questions are huge energy directors. Why is this happening to me? Okay, well, how's that going to make you feel? And what actions are you going to take? And I know people might be thinking, well, what does that have to do with what I'm talking about? Focus. I want to get stuff done. It has everything to do with getting stuff done and getting the right stuff done. Does that make sense?
Oh, trust me. I've been ever since I've been getting on your stuff, ever since I've been reading your book. Actually, I listened to one of your podcasts with Michelle Prince, and she explained this beautifully. And I sort of came up with something. This is just a line of thought that I'll see if you agree with, disagree with, all of these things. So you asked the question, first of all, what is focus, right? And, focus is something like, and this is maybe not adding to your definition, but it's agreeing with your definition in that it is just focusing on only one thing and not avoiding, but not thinking about the rest of the environment. So for example, if I'm focused on this conversation, I'm not listening to the sounds of the room, and I'm not listening to whatever. If there's a lawnmower outside, I'm tuning that out, and we're just having this conversation.
Right. And that's attention.
Exactly. Right. So, and then, yeah, you could broaden that up. And that's exactly what I'm thinking. So, okay. So what is the opposite of focus? The opposite of focus is complexity, right? Because what we're doing is I'm taking this conversation and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to avoid the 500 sounds that are going on around me. Rather, I'm just going to focus on this one thing, and I'm going to make it nice and simple. And that's perfect. Right. So now you think, okay, college kids, right? So now you broaden this out and you say, okay, college kids, they struggle to focus, but maybe their focus isn't on this level of, okay, you know what? I don't know what to do with my, which class to take or how to study on homework. Maybe they don't know what to focus on and who they are. And well, the problem is, let's see if I could break this down. Something like they're too complex, right? Because when you're 18 to 22 years old, and when you're in high school, when you're in middle school, the goal is to take the giant complex being that you are, right? Because you're so many different things, right? You like sports, and you also like, reading, but you also like this, and you're a family man, but you also really love to grind, and all of these things. And there's so many different aspects to you. And you try to figure out how to take all these complexity things and put it all into one personality. And we struggle with that so hard. And I'm struggling with that personally at the moment. Like, I'm asking myself, oh yeah, what is my brand? What are the things that define me? And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm just a trillion different things that are all sort of mangled together into this weird person that I am. And then
held together by our flesh, right?
yeah. Like, and that's it.
I think it's not just college students. I think that you'll find that at every stage of our life, and I would agree with you that we struggle with this complexity, the complexity of ourselves, the complexity of our relationships with each other, with the world around us. So I agree with that. It's a great way to put it, is that focusing in the moment is giving your attention, right? And simplifying what's important to you right now. And some people call that presence.
Yeah. Right. And then you could even broaden that out, and you could say, okay, yeah. And this is probably like the third part of it, which is like, okay, now you try to look for, instead of presence, let's say you're trying to find your purpose, right? Because everybody needs a why. Everybody needs that thing that they're striving for, that one goal, And the problem is, if you're too complex, if you have all these different things going so many different directions, and this is my problem, you have no idea what you want. If you don't know who you are, how are you supposed to know what you want? And then that's the problem, right? So we can't pick some major goal to focus on. And you talked about this all the time. You say that there's the major goal to focus on, and then you align your actions to go and find that, and track that purpose essentially, and go and achieve that thing. But if you can't figure out who you are, and if you don't know what you want, then you have no idea, then you can't focus. That's sort of the symptom of the cause that you were talking about. So,
which makes it more complex, right?
Which makes what more complex?
When you don't know your identity, you don't know why and what your purpose is, it makes it more complex, right? It adds, I believe, right? The simplification is knowing what it is. Complexity is trying to figure it out.
And that's exactly right. And that's the difficult part, right? Because I'm sitting here and I say, okay, if I want to focus on something, if I want to be highly focused, then I have to give up all of my complexity, right? I have to give up all the things that make me me, and I have to choose just one thing. But the answer is, and it seems like that's what you're supposed to do, right? That's what people do in their 20s,
it's society's, you got to pick, my son's got to pick a major now in his senior year. He's 17. He doesn't know what he wants to do for the rest of his life. Like, that's a big ask to have to identify a single major.
Yeah, like that's crazy. And, you think about it, but that's kind of the thing that people have always done. And I'm sorry, like, I had so many, like, there are so many problems with it, right? And it feels kind of, like weird for that to happen. But it seems like that's the way it always is, right? Because to function in a society, one person needs one skill, another person needs another skill. You have a carpenter, you have a teacher, you have all these things, and you hyper focus on that one thing. And then everybody kind of pulls together their skills. And then as a society, therefore that creates the complexity. But let's say, oh, you want to be have you ever heard the phrase, the jack of all trades is a master of none?
Sure.
It's like, exactly, right? If I want to be a carpenter for 1 year and I want to be a teacher for another, and I want to do this, and that, then by the end of it, I'm not even providing any value and I'm not making anyone's life better.
Well, that's not true.
How so?
Right? It's not true that you're not adding any value or you're not making anyone's lives better. It means that you're not an expert in any one of those spaces.
Yes.
So your goal might not be to be the expert in one of those spaces. So I think that's where we get clear and say that we don't have to have a goal like everyone else's goal. We don't have to be a specific expert in one space if we don't choose to. And I highly suggest that in the beginning of one's career, I mean, I didn't start out to be a motivational speaker and, and a strategic business coach. I mean, I started out in accounting and finance. It just wasn't for me.
Interesting. Okay.
And I really loved computer classes in college. And so when I was out of college and I was working, in sort of the accounting and finance area, I gravitated to all the systems. And so I worked in the systems for the different accounting and finance groups, but I worked on the systems. And then I started my own technology business because I like the systems. And of course, in my head, I was like, I can't do this. I don't have a degree in IT. And, I was like, well, whatever, this guy's doing it and he's getting paid more than me and I'm better than he is. So I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that here's what I would say to people, and maybe this goes away from the conversation of focus, but in order to create that alignment between your goals and your actions is sometimes, and I want to step back for a second, but my belief is that you need to try a lot of different things in order to find out what's your thing.
Well, so it's actually really interesting. So it's right now it's really funny. We're talking about the complexity of focus, right? Like, and that's such a, that's a paradox in and of itself, but it is, right? And there was this great book that I read. I highly suggest that you read it. Actually, when I was 18, my mentor recommended it to me. It's called Range by
I've not heard of it.
David Epstein. And I read it and it absolutely blew my mind. So this is exactly what we're talking about. And essentially what it says is the people who, when they're younger, experience more things, right? They don't choose something right away and run with it like a child prodigy, right? Because the thing about child prodigies is statistically they go, and they're outpacing everybody. But by the time they hit 18, they're no better than everyone else. Like the thing that just made them incredible was the child part of it, that they were better than other
Curiosity.
children. Yeah, exactly. But when you see someone like Beethoven or, Mozart, those people are just outliers. They're just the few people that really were able to take it throughout their whole career. You never hear of that many child prodigies nowadays who still are successful into their adulthood.
Right.
And the reason why is because, and he includes so much more data than I could even, remember. But the fact that the people who succeed are the ones who experience multiple things in their younger ages. They start to, they say, here, I'm going to go with this, here, I'm going to go with this. And then now that their world is expanded a little bit more, then they choose what to focus on. And that's exactly what you did, right? You didn't start your IT company until you were 25.
Absolutely. And so, and that's why when I talk about focus, I talk about it from the concept of an attitude and creating meaning in our lives. And so sometimes that means not choosing one thing.
Yeah. Interesting. Wait, explain that.
Yeah. I don't know. I just said it. I've never said it before that way, but it's on the conversation because sometimes that's the best way to get clarity is not to choose one direction. And that may go against what but eventually you will get to where you need to go and where you want to focus. But that doesn't mean that we need to have hyper focus in every moment. That's obsessive, right? And in my book, I talk about the productivity zone and being over functioning or in perfectionism and under functioning in procrastination. So needing to be focused all the time and on, and, all this on our phone all the time and doing it has the opposite effect, like anything does. When you tip the scale, even like a great characteristic trait becomes it has a cost to it when it's over functioning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean,
So it's the same with hyperfocus. There's lately they've been talking about hyper positivity. So toxic positivity, right? Which is being just overly positive. So what I say about focus is it's just being purposeful.
Yeah.
Right. Imagine that it doesn't have to mean that in every moment you're achieving something. It means that you're making decisions and choosing how to show up based on purpose and what will give you purpose, what fulfills your purpose right now. And that might be doing multiple different things. It might be not making a decision on something so that you can sit with the options.
Yeah. And it seems like that there's a sort of balance that comes into it because, and you talk about this a lot, there's a problem with being hyper-focused, right? Because when you're too focused, when you're too far in that way, first of all, you can be a perfectionist and that could lead to huge problems. But also, if you tune out, because focus is almost by definition tuning out the rest of the world, choosing one thing and then tuning out the rest. What if a better opportunity shows up?
That's right. You miss opportunities.
Yeah, and you miss out on, okay, well, there was this great study. I'll bring it to you really, really briefly. They gave people money, $5 or $10, and they said either use it, spend it on yourself, take this $5, spend it on yourself, or give it to someone else. So $5, $10. So that means there's 4 groups. Person who has $5 gives it to themselves, $10 gives it to themselves, $5 gives to other person, $10 gives to other person, right? So now, given that, they said, which one out of the 4 is going to make you the happiest, right? Which one is going to bring the most happiness? And everyone said $10 for myself, right? $10 for myself. It makes so much sense. I'm going to buy something really nice and it's going to make me the happiest. In reality, guess which one made them the happiest?
It's giving to someone else.
5 or 10?
I don't know. Since it sounds like there's a little twist to it, I'll say 5.
Yes. and it's the least, it's the one that you'd expect the least. And the reason why they presume is that, and this was from feedback too, the people who gave away $10 said, now that it's $10, I felt like I actually should have gave more. Like I felt like I should have gave 20, 30, like I actually felt this dissatisfaction. But when I gave 5, it was just like holding the door open for somebody. It just, it was a nice little gesture. I didn't care about the money. It was just so nice that I enjoyed it. I didn't care about how much money I gave. I was just happy that I did this nice little thing. Right. And the thing that you get out of this is that unfortunately, we humans are so bad at planning that we can't predict our own happiness. We can't predict our own happiness. And while we are good at planning and creating systems, right? Like maybe planning was the wrong term, but I could plan, okay, how am I going to start this podcast? How am I going to, set up the microphone and do all these things? But I can't plan 30 years down the future because I don't know who I'm going to be 30 years down the future. So we go and we choose these careers. Oh yes, I'm going to, be a finance person for 30 years. I'm going to get married for the next 30 years and be with this one person, which might be a little controversial, but we make all these decisions and then we lock it in. We say, yes, I'm going to get married, or I'm going to, develop this skill and I'm going to stick with it. When in reality, we have no idea if that's going to make us the happiest because we predict wrong. So the answer to that is probably to have more experiences.
Maybe it brings me back to the point that what comes up for me as you're saying that, remember I said we're all control freaks.
Yeah.
It's because we have such a desire to control and know what that outcome is that we can't just not know. We have a problem with uncertainty and our relationship with uncertainty. And so it makes us control freaks. And so therefore we have to make those decisions, or we feel like we have to make those decisions so that we'll be successful and we'll be happy. And this is what happy looks like.
Yeah. And it makes us secure. Yeah, like it gives us so much security, right? To be like, all right, this is my path. I'm going to go here, then I'm going to go here, then I'm going to go here. You never have to answer that question anymore. You're like, all right, I got the plan figured out. Now I don't have to worry about it.
Right. And at the end of the day, instead of giving us security, it gives us stress. Right? It's a total contradiction.
It's a total contradiction. We're so weird, aren't we?
That's what makes us complex, right?
Yeah.
Figuring it out.
So one of my
Wow.
friends, she had this amazing idea that she gave to me. She told me the purpose of college is not to figure out what you want to do with your life, because that seems to be the prevailing notion, right? Go to college. Okay, what do you want to, like, the first question someone asks you is, what are you going to be? Accounting, finance,
Mm,
psychologist, teacher, whatever, right? And that's always the question. That's the question, because first of all, it's a huge financial decision, but also there's that pressure, right? Of what do I want to do?
right.
She says the goal of college is to first figure out who you are, and then from there figure out what you want to do. Because if you have no idea who you are, then you're just stumbling around just trying to find something to latch onto, and then you latch onto it and you stick with it, but you have no
Right.
idea what makes you happy.
Well, I like that definition. And I want to say that I think that's what we're here for in general. I think that would be great. If you can figure out who you are in 4 years, go for it, right? Do it. I
Yeah.
think we spend our entire lives figuring out who we are. And that's
Mm.
maybe the whole purpose of why we're here, is just to play the game.
I
And
think about that all the time.
so, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I think I know who I am. And sometimes you get in these really interesting conversations and then you're like,
and
open
then
up
you
new.
and then you realize you're always in flux, you're always changing, and like maybe and this is why I'm so against contracts and saying like, oh, I'm going to be in this career for the next 20 years, because really what you're saying is I'm going to be the same person 20 years from now, right? Or my desires aren't going to change, and I'm going to lock myself in now, but maybe 10 years along the line you'll realize maybe I don't like this, maybe I'm a new person, and the who I am, this quote who I am, is always changing.
Absolutely. And that being said, some people find themselves sooner than others. Like some people know that they have a love for music and they have a talent and they pursue that and they take it to, all new heights or whatever. And that's awesome, right? We're all in different places, and that's perfect. It's
Yeah.
the
Well,
way it's designed. We're all in different places and we'll figure it out when we figure it out.
so then let me ask you. So one of the things that I notice in college is that people find themselves lost, right? So this is what I notice, and I experienced this in my own life, right? A lot of the
Okay.
parental figures and like community members in my town, they picked the thing that they thought they wanted to focus on and they stuck with it, right? That's sort of the 1960s traditional path.
Right.
And they chose, okay, you know what? I want financial security. So I'm going to go with, pick a job that you hate, finance, accounting,
Right.
all that. And they stuck with it. And 30 years down the road, they realize, I hate my life. Like, this is not who I want to be. This is too stressful, too awful.
Right.
Like, this doesn't make me
Right.
happy.
Maybe they didn't have the experiences that they wanted to have in life and so forth.
Exactly. Right. And that's like, you watch movies and like, that's the key thing to every movie. I just watched The Secret Life of Walter Mitty last night, and that was the exact idea. Great
Right.
movie. Right. So,
Right.
so that's also Star Wars, just so you know. But Darth Vader is the guy who chose the wrong path and hates his life and does all that stuff. But
Interesting.
but anyways, I love I'm a movie guy, but anyways, yeah, like children now, they look along and they see this generation ahead of us and they say, I don't want to do that. Right? They say, I don't want to pick a path that I'm going to hate. I don't want to pick a path that is miserable and find myself 30 years down the road in the same spot. So what do? They pick nothing. Right? They say, you know what? Maybe the problem is choosing a path, right? Or maybe the problem is choosing a path, and therefore
Gotcha. That they feel
focused.
locked in.
Yeah, because you don't want that commitment. It's too much of a
Right.
commitment, and I feel this all the time. And then what are you left with? You're lost, right?
Right.
It's
May
maybe
I share a story that totally might help some people?
yes.
That this was because when you say that, it reminds me of when I was living. So I lived in Zurich, Switzerland for 16 years.
Wow.
It was very cool.
What age range?
From 25 to 40.
Oh wow. Okay. So this was a conscious choice. Yeah.
So I was working for JP Morgan in accounting and finance, right? And before I get to the story, is that I think that people don't pick a path and then they stick with it and then they're miserable. I think we need to understand that we choose how we show up for anything, right? You can find something fun and curious, and people are incredibly dynamic and complex and wonderful, and they exist in every single job that's out there, right? So we can decide what we want to make with any path, and we can change that path at any time. We have the power. Even if there's some consequences and complexities to it because you're relying on a certain income or whatever, there's always a path and a choice. And there's always a consequence, right? To any path. If you stick with something, then there's things that can be great and things that not so great, and things pick a different path. Like I picked to go overseas. I sought it out. My company had an opportunity for me. It was a 1-year assignment. I took the assignment and then I wanted to stay. Who wants to leave, right? They sent these women all over, those women who sent to, and I'm not just saying it's just about women, but we're a sucker for accents, right? So one went to Paris, one went to Madrid, I went to Switzerland, none of us came back because we loved it. And we fell in love with the culture and the country and the people and so forth. So I spent 16 years there.
Wow.
And I came to a path, a place where I was married. I had 2 kids at that point that were 1 and 3. And I was questioning, do I want to stay here? Is this the right place for me to stay? It's a beautiful country. It's like heaven on earth. Why would I leave? I don't know. I just felt like there was something with my son had these terrible anger issues, and I had just gone through a divorce, and I felt like I needed to make a decision. Was I going to stay and raise them there, or was I going to bring them back to the US? What's the right thing to do?
Okay.
And then I was really torn by it. It created a lot of stress for me. As you can imagine, it's a really big decision.
Yeah.
And I read an article in an Oprah magazine. Sometimes the messages that come to us are in the weirdest places. Like you said, you love movies. I get messages that nobody else gets from movies that I'm like, that's what I'm supposed to do with my life. Or, like some big aha comes from those things around us because our guard is down. We're open to getting in connection with our gut.
Yep.
So this article was about people coming out of addiction centers, and that they were coming back into their homes and their environments where all those triggers were that triggered them in the first place to choose, to initially choose to get involved in drugs or something that's addicting, and then having the challenge of getting away from it. Yeah. So going back into that environment is a huge risk. And there was a lot of anxiety when they would get out, and they played this game with them, a kid's game. We all know it. It's called Hot or Colder. Almost every kid has played it. Something's hidden in the room, and you walk into the room. And what happens when you walk into the room and you don't take a step and you just stand there? What happens?
Nothing happens.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about, and this is what triggered it for me, and what triggered it for me and myself, is if I do nothing, I will get no feedback. I won't be able to trust my gut or know if I'm headed in the right direction or not. I have to take a step forward, and that feedback comes and it says hotter, colder, warmer. And those signals are there for us.
Wow.
But if we don't take a step, we won't know. So that's came up for me to decide, do I move? Do I not move? Well, then I saw a movie, and that movie made me feel like, okay, I need to move. And I did.
Wow.
knowing that I could also move back, right? Like it's not, sometimes we think and we make decisions. They are complex, but sometimes we make it more than it needs to be. Like, yeah, could I unwind it? Could I move back if I wanted to? Absolutely. I had a passport. I have a Swiss passport. So if I felt like it wasn't the right decision and I got the colder, then I would make an adjustment, right? We can adapt, we can pivot. And this is a perfect time, still in the pandemic, of understanding that it's all about the pivot. Life is just a big game of hot or colder.
Wow. That is incredible. And it's really so funny because what you're describing right there is, it sounds like something like a midlife crisis, right? And,
Yes. It's a big decision of where you're going to take your life. So that could happen at any age, right?
Yeah.
Like you guys at college.
And that's what it seems like. One of the things that I find is that whenever I get to, and this is one of the things that people struggle with, as they grow older, and I experience this probably monthly, which is really, really weird. But because time just moves so slow, like when you're young and doing all these things, and you feel like you're gonna be young forever. But one of the things that yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But anyways, like the thing that I see all the time is we kind of get ourselves locked in this stability or rigidity, right? So we go super far and then we find a place that works for us and then we settle there, right? So you settled somewhere for 15, 16 years, right? And then
Right.
the thing that you realized, and that's what it seemed like, was, oh, this was perfect for you when you were 25. It was probably really great for you when you were 30. It was probably pretty great for you when you were 35. But by the time that you were 40, well, you're a new person now, right? You're a completely new person. And you're like, you know what? I'm different. The world is different. Everything's different. And if I continue on this, let's say, focused path, right? On this path of I'm going to ignore the rest of the environment, just focus on where I am, then you're going to miss out on, wait a second, there's a better way of being. There's a better place for me, or a better type of, experience for me. And I think we experience that all the time.
Absolutely. And it can change. Like you said, it could be in 5 years, right? From now, I might say, you know what, I'm ready to go back to Europe, or I was talking about living in Italy for retirement and whatnot. So, things change. I know a friend who never thought that this would happen to him, but he's living on a yacht right now. And he, just awesome. Didn't plan it, but an opportunity came up, and he says he's living his best life, right? So,
well, so that's the thing that I'm trying to find, and in my own personal life as well as intellectually, right, through these conversations, is just, where's the balance, right? So yes, the wrong way is just picking one path and sticking with it for the rest of your life, but also the wrong path is just not playing this hotter, colder game, which I absolutely love, by the way. That was incredible. And we find ourselves lost, but I have mentors on some side saying, pick one thing and stick with it, right? And don't set a long timetable. Don't say that you're going to commit to it for the next 40 years, but just pick one thing and focus on it and stick with it. That would be Jordan Peterson, right? If you know him, he's got a really strong message like that. But then maybe that's probably towards the more focused side. But what about, like where should I lie on the spectrum?
Depends on you, right? I mean, I agree that, when I say that it's a game of hot or colder, you can't just be at a job and in a career for a day, a week, a month and say, okay, I tried it.
Yep.
Right. So you have to give it a real college try. I don't know, that's an expression.
Yep.
You have to give it a decent amount of time and to really see what you can create with it, what you can learn from it, what it can be for you. So I do think that you have to choose. I chose to come back to the US. That didn't mean that I was going to only come back for 3 months and then freak out because I wasn't achieving what I wanted to achieve here. Right. So, and nobody knows, right? You got to listen to the messages, and also that's where the complexity comes in. Is there's no book. There's not like you can pull out the manual and say, here's where I should be at this time. Each of us individually has to surround ourselves with great people to support us, right? Good friends and good mentors, and coaches can help us to ask questions to get to what our answers are. And just because someone else says you should be somewhere doesn't mean that's so. Like, I remember when I first moved back, I was starting pretty much fresh. And I remember my brother said, "You're all over the place." He's like, you're doing some of these events and you're coaching this and you're, and even though to me, it all like was part of a spider web it all fit together. But to him, it seemed like these disparate, like things that didn't connect. And I'm like, well, they are, because they're all parts of the same thing that I'm trying to figure out which direction I want to take.
Yeah. Yeah. And
but he was really pressuring me. He's like, you got to make money. He's like, you got to stop And you got to just pick one and focus. And I tell you, it made me really stressed out for a whole day. I was like stressed, like, oh my God, and I have my kids and da, da, da.
Yeah.
And I woke up the next morning and I was completely calm. And I'm like, that's him. I'm good.
Interesting. Like I noticed that in my own life. It's an eternal debate. The question of how many things can I focus on at one time, and yeah, how can I juggle this? Like what I noticed in my personal life is I can't be working on too many projects at one time. Like,
Yeah.
like I pick one project, grind it out for a month, and then move on to the next project. I've tried the 3, 4 projects at a time, and it just doesn't work for me.
Doesn't
Like,
work.
yeah, it just can't work. But one of the things is, when I'm doing multiple projects at a time, what I'm really doing is I'm surveying, right? It sounds like that's kind of what you were doing. You were like, well, I don't know what I want, so I'm going to try 3 things, and then I'm going to eventually whittle it down. Or maybe you have the capacity to do 3 projects at a time. Like some people are built that way.
Well, it's hard to say, depends on the projects, right? So,
Yeah.
they all related. It was the same content type of thing, whether I was coaching someone one-on-one or whether I was doing an event and looking to move an event forward.
Got it.
For that,
They were all
time
on.
in my life, it worked. Sorry.
Yeah, like they were all under one branch. It was like, one pretty, like one strong niche, and then everything kind of contributed towards that.
Yeah, kind of. So, but there are times like now, too many different projects. I can tell when I'm overcommitted and I just have to let some stuff go or push it off or things like that. So I think you have to look at your stress level. Like when you talk about balance, like, is this serving me? Do I feel good? Am I juiced and excited about it? Or am I starting to feel anxious and not getting the results that I want? Right. It's kind of also getting in relationship with your results. If you're getting the results and it's not burning you out, like you feel good and you're not like burning your relationships, there's no like collateral damage, then maybe it's working for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't realize that, like, the cause of all overwhelming, right? The feeling of being overwhelmed is complexity. It's juggling too many things at one time.
Yeah.
Right. And that is like, if you ever feel overwhelmed, it's probably because you have too many things on your plate and you gotta weed it down a little bit.
So let's talk about this in your case, right? So you have a certain number of credits that you're supposed to take, right? You have multiple classes. Those are multiple projects, right?
Yeah.
And you manage them. You got to take, probably how many classes do you take at one time? 5?
You're supposed to take 5. I usually do 6.
Okay. Whoa. So there you go. So you take 6. What an overachiever, right? So we can do it because how do you make that work?
How do I make that work?
Yeah.
God, how do I make that work? I mean, I guess I just do it. I don't know. Like obviously I have like my calendar and I'm like, I need to work on I'm taking neuroscience. I need to work on my neuro here and my business classes here and do all that stuff. But I just kind of like schedule out my time and say, okay, this is when I'm going to be doing X and this is when I'm going to be doing Y.
You schedule it, you compartmentalize, right? When you're sitting down to study neuro, you're just looking at neuro.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with managing multiple projects. You're talking about projects on top of 6 classes, right?
Yeah.
So you're only, so we all have a point where it spills over. And for everybody, it's different, right? You can take 6 classes and maybe manage 2 other projects, right? Run a podcast and,
I run a YouTube channel on the side too. Yeah.
Right. So that seems to be, you get a feeling of what works for you when you start to get overwhelmed and it starts to spill over. And then you're like, okay, I gotta cut back on something. And, but there is a certain number of multiple things that we juggle. We all do. Cause it's impossible. We live, like you said, multifaceted lives. I have kids. I can't just say, hey kids, I'm not going to be your mom for a little while because I'm working on this project. They're like, oh, you're not going to feed us? I can teach them to cook. And we can have them help out in certain ways, but I still got to drive them to practice or the doctor's appointments or, you know what I mean? So
yeah. Like you dedicate at some points in your life, you're dedicating more time towards, for example, work and some more time towards family. And I like to think of it as pieces of a pie.
Yeah, exactly. Like it could be the pieces of the pie. And so your classes, each class represents a certain piece, but that goes into academic. And then you've got the things that you love that are within, another piece and it might be split into different sections. So,
well, Well,
It's just finding what it is for us.
well, you wonder why people have so much, like they struggle with time so much. And for me, like I struggle with it so much. And that's part of why I love having you on this podcast. It's because I get to the end of my 16-hour day and I'm like, Jesus, like it would be so great if I could go for 20 hours. It would be so great if I could go for 24. It would be so great if I had 32 hours in this day,
I've
and
done it.
yeah.
I've done it. It'll burn you out. It's not sustainable.
Oh, trust me. Like you know how easy it is. Like the first thing that goes whenever I get into this mindset, and I've been trying to fix it, but I still get into these modes sometimes. Is then I cut back on sleep, right?
Right. Oh yeah, you sleep when you're dead, right?
Yep, I'll sleep when I'm dead, of course, right? And then maybe I'll cut back on gym, like working out and doing that. And what ends up happening is that after I did that all of last week. So yeah, I had my family coming in and I was like, let me grind 4 days, 7 days worth of work in 4 days. So I didn't go to the gym and I slept 5, 6 hours a day. And I told myself at the end of it, I was like, I could probably do this for another 2 weeks before I burn out. And then I'm done.
Right. So here's what I've learned from that, because I've been there, and sometimes I still go back there. Right, I have to keep practicing. As I said, it's a practice.
Yeah, it's a journey.
But I learned something really important from Tim Ferriss. First, I hated his book, The 4-Hour Work Week. Hated it because I thought, what a jerk! Like he's working 4 hours a week. That's bullshit. Like. Yep. And that was right in the core of where I was working, like, whatever, 60, 70 hours, really burning the candle at both ends. And I'm like, it's impossible to grow a big business like that. And that's where it comes into the energy of our focus and the questions that we ask ourselves, is that I was kind of stuck in one way of thinking and I was focused on time. And so what I learned later in the years is that, his idea, he's focused on the outcome. He's not focused on time. He's focused on the end result that he wants. And then he can use time as a positive constraint to create innovation and different ways to look at things. So now you could say, well, how could I, right? If you ask the question, how could I run my business, whatever his goal was, let's say make $100,000 at the time, right? He was just out of college or whatever, or $1 million, whatever it is, right? Make $1 million and only work for 4 hours a week. Now your mind starts to work and think about, who cares about time? Now time is the constraint. I only have 4 hours, but my goal is to make $1 million and only in that 4 hours. Now you're going to look at things differently. What is it that I'm going to do with my time? What am I not going to do with my time? What am I going to hire? What needs to happen and so forth. And different connections start to take place. So, I'd encourage you to do the same thing. Take whatever you're doing now, in whatever time you're doing it, and cut it in half and figure that out. Like that's what I'm doing. I like my podcast, but it's taking me too much time now. So I've just decided I'm going to dedicate half the time, but I'm still going to double my results. And that's my goal for the next into 2022, is to achieve that in half the time.
So you're saying that to do that, it needs a completely different strategy, right? For you to cut your time in half and to also double your results, you need a completely different strategy.
Completely different strategy. And when we're focused on time, you look for little areas of optimization. There's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But I've learned that that's just going to get you tiny bits of optimization. And why not make yourself look at it differently? Because that's where you're caught up, is that you're looking at it in the same way. So you're not seeing what you don't see.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. That's really like, I'm not saying much because I'm thinking like, I'm like, okay, well, because I do a lot of research on Tim Ferriss. Like actually, I told you my family just came down. I told them to bring the 4-Hour Work Week because I haven't, like literally that was the only book that they brought because I haven't read it in 2 years. And, like I feel like I need to go through it again. And the first time I read it, I didn't take it seriously.
Right.
Right. 4 hours in a work week. Are you serious? Like,
right.
Don't be silly, Tim. Like, and yeah, I guess it makes sense, right? It makes so much sense to be like, okay, our brain is a planning brain. We love to plan. We love to think. But yes, I have a calendar every day and my calendar is all based on time. Everything's based on time. It would be nice if I was able to cut it down, but you'd have to, like the problem I have with Tim Ferriss is like, okay, you know what? I would have to spend a lot more money doing, hiring people and getting,
Maybe,
workers. Probably.
maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not. Right. So we have a lot of set of assumptions that go with the old way of doing things that are different than the new way of doing things. I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm not saying that'll be the answer. Right. And I'll let you know next year when I achieve what I'm looking to achieve in that period of time. But I do find that when we ask ourselves better questions and we focus on how we're going to solve for that, we tend to get the result that we want.
Interesting.
Because we shift our focus, we shift strategy, and you just, it's not an option to stay with it the way that it is.
All right. Well, that means I'm going to spend the next maybe 2 months of my life considering and pondering that question because.
Well, let me know how it goes.
Yeah, right. All right, Penny Zenker, thank you for coming on, and tell everybody where they could find you and tell them what's going on in your life.
Awesome. Well, they can find me at pennysKeynote.com. That's the easiest way to find me. And what's going on in my life is I'm pondering that next book that I'm going to write for next year.
Yeah.
I might even call it Control Freak. I don't know. I'm thinking about this whole idea of, or you're a control freak, like, taunting people and digging deeper into that and personal ownership. So stay tuned.
Yeah. And everybody, you're a little too humble. Everybody check out her podcast. She's got an incredible podcast. Okay. Like I've been listening to it. It's incredible. Check out her book, The Productivity Zone. Really, really incredible. I'll have the Amazon link in the description below. And then also check out her TED Talk. Like her TED Talk was really, really mind blowing. And it's just like, it's a short glimpse of Penny Zenker. It really, really blows your mind. And it has almost like 1 million views. Like it's incredible.
I'm almost there. So maybe your viewership can help me, listenership. I'm looking to get to 2 million views. I'm at 935,000 or something like that now. So I'm right there. And and one other thing. So I was also an executive producer on a film that came out
no way
this year. It was a dream of mine to be part of a film, and a film that was going to make a difference for people. So it's called Wishman.
Wishman.
Yeah, it's about Frank Shankowitz, who unfortunately recently passed. He was one of the founders of the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and it's his story. He wanted his story told. So that was his wish, and I was grateful to be a part of it.
Wow, that's incredible. So everything there will be in the description below, and you better check her out. She's got some good stuff going on. Thank you, Penny. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Nick Lugo Show with Penny Zenker. To support this podcast, please give me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And so I'll leave you with a quote from Confucius, the creator of Confucianism. The man who moves mountains begins by carrying away small stones. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again next time.